All right, all. Welcome, welcome. I am so excited to see how many of you turned out. And there were just so many others too who wrote to ask, is this being recorded because they're interested and they just couldn't make it, which is understandable. And so I'm really looking forward to the conversation that I think is going to emerge. And I want to begin any I want to begin this the way that I begin any process of learning and self-examination and growth, and that is the study of Torah. So if you know the bracha, join me. Otherwise, amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. So let me start out this evening. I'm going to move the Zoom windows off the screen in another moment or two, but this gives you a chance to see who's with us. Hey, Joan. Hey, Terry. I'm going to give you just a sense of why I undertook this process and then how I went about it. The why really has to do with making sure that you know your audience, so to speak. When a new rabbi comes into a congregation, there are two schools of thought about how to inject yourself into the system. The first school says, make 90% of the changes that you plan to make in that first year, because after that, you'll never get around to them. The second school of thought says, make 10% of the changes you plan to make in that first year, because you got to get to know your people first. Don't assume that you know what they want or who they are or what they need. And I chose the latter plan. So over the last years, some of you may be surprised to hear me say it, but I've been really reserved, going slowly, taking my time, respecting everybody's opinions. And now that I have a lifetime contract, what do I care? God, how many times a week do I say that? Yeah, too frequent. So, as I start thinking about how exciting it is to be on this journey together, a partnership between professional staff and the congregation, it behooves me to maintain an awareness of that wisdom, of making sure that you respect the place that you're in, and gathering a good sense of who we are. And it's no longer who you are. This is us. And trying to understand where we stand today really helps a lot in figuring out what is our trajectory. And there's three different considerations. One is, how do we behave? Number two is, how do we feel? And number three is, what do we think we might want? And very rarely are those three things in the same spot. So I know how we behave. I'm there with us for services. I see the liturgy that we use. I see who shows up to what kind of activities at Temple Sinai, what gathers the most interest. I see the ways in which the budget reflects our values and where we put our energy. That's how we behave. This was a piece of the goal to figure out, well, how do we think? How do we feel? Who do we think of ourselves as being? Which is always going to have a discrepancy from how we behave. And then the third piece, which is going to take years of formation, is to figure out together where we're going. All of this is part and parcel with the leadership that Betsy gave us through the Awakenings conversations and the one-on-ones that I've been having all year long with millennials and past leaders, with the town hall meetings I've had with our young families. All of this is just about information gathering, a listening campaign, I suppose, if you will. So before no, you know what I think I'm going to do? I will happily entertain questions as we go, but I'm going to try to keep us moving so that we get through it all. So if your question is too good, I will probably parking lot it just for the time being and make sure we come back to it. If it's not good enough, I'll say, that's a great question, and we won't come back to it. So folks online, I'm going to move you off the screen so that we in the room aren't seeing you. I also won't have an easy time seeing you, even if you raise your Zoom hand. So if you want to jump in with a question, just unmute yourselves and say, excuse me, and then we'll know that you have something to share with us. Sound good? Okay. Now. Oh, and I need to actually, I think for the folks at home, it'd be easier if I share the screen with them. See if I can do that. I was having a little trouble with that the other day. Okay. Folks at home, are you seeing the big what do we believe thing?
Perfect.
Oh,
Yes. Yes.
Fine.
thank you. Okay. So I want to start by talking about methodology and how I went about doing this. And at the beginning and the middle, and then again at the end, I want to thank Wind because while I know very little about running surveys and then working with results, she knows a lot, and she's been a partner in a great deal that I've done over the years here at Sinai, and I really appreciate you and the time you gave me. So I asked Wynn to come take a look at this survey I'd written, and she came and sat and she said, you can do better in a much nicer way than that. And she lifted it to the level that you finally received. Once the results went out, you saw that I gave 2 reminder emails, and then about a month of open opportunity to participate. And interestingly, since I closed it, I've had another half dozen people say, oh, is it too late? And in the nicest possible way, I said yes. Because once it was closed, then I invited Wind back. And she and I sat together and looked at the 215 sets of responses. And that is a remarkable response rate. I am really impressed that a congregation of our size had that many participants. I also know, and we'll talk more about this later, that there were a great number more who got into the survey, realized, oh, this is going to make me think. Who's got time for that? And abandon the process. So there is a flaw in the system. And by the way, that demographic, which tended to say, who's got time for this, skewed to the younger side, which is not surprising. And again, we'll talk about that some more. Once I got the responses, they were, well, I printed them out in this fashion. I've got 4 huge packets of double-sided microscopic sized text, and realized that in order to be able to do anything with it, we were going to have to figure out how to organize the data. And Wind tried to show me how to use ChatGPT. It was my first experience with it. Once she left, I couldn't get it to do what I wanted. So I went back to the old-fashioned way, and I just created my own coding method. And I spent 1 full day. I cleared off my calendar, I shut my office door, and I just spread out my materials and went blind coding responses. What I had to do was to be somewhat heavy-handed in forcing answers into particular buckets, because the demographics I'll show you in a moment were easy. So, if we move to this first slide, the first slide had a question, do you identify as Jewish? And it was pretty easy for us to, there we go, to get answers on that. I didn't have to do anything here. The answers were given for us. So of the people who responded, most of them said I'm Jewish by birth. Some of them said I'm Jewish by choice. A small number said no. And then 10% just really couldn't answer the question without a little bit more explanation. So I just lumped those together as it's complicated. So these kinds of answers were somewhat easy. There wasn't a whole lot of interpretation to go along with that. Then as we move into the next, I guess I have to click it twice for each one. I wanted to get a sense of how much time we spend thinking about this. Now I had to start really forcing people into categories. So what I decided to do was to take other answers as they provided them, open form answers, and figure out where to drop them. So 58 people who answered the response, which equals 29% of the respondents, said, I think about this spirituality stuff every day. It's a part of how I live my life. 29%, then a couple times a month, it occurs to me. I have a moment. It brings me to that kind of thinking. 30% of the respondents said about a couple times a year. And that was, that's what brings me back. 9% said it's been a long time. In some form or other, it's been a long time since I've thought about this stuff. And 3% said, I have never thought about this stuff, which again, is just interesting. The answers are going to get harder for me to categorize, but this one is perhaps the most interesting. And actually, I thought I had another slide here that. All right, so I thought I had one more slide that didn't seem to pop up, but I'm pretty sure this slide that I wanted to share with you was the age demographics. And I think that this is really important. So before I go on, I want to share that. So imagine a pie chart. And I asked the respondents, which age bracket do you fall into in 10-year increments? And 27% of the respondents fell between the ages of 55 to, no, I'm sorry, 60 to 69. 22% fell between 70 and 79. 13% were above the age of 80. I'm going to go down now. 22% were in their 50s. 12% were in their 40s. 4% were in their 30s. And only 1% or less than 1% were in their 18 to 30 bracket. So it's hard to see without the graphic, but that means that 2/3 of the respondents were in their 50s and up. Yeah, Betsy. It does not reflect us writ large. I don't have solid data on that, but we are a well-distributed age range. There are synagogues where that would be representative. That's not Sinai. So that is a real flaw in the process. So it's important for you to hold that in your mind. Who answered this survey? And that has a lot of bearing on the material that we can extrapolate using it. Okay. So here is question number 1. Do you believe in God? And I had to go through. Come on. There it is. I had to go through, and here's where I started having to really force answers into categories. I didn't want to have, well, here, let me show you. This is how the answers really looked. This is what came right from your answers. 38% said, yes, I believe in God. 14 or 15% said, nope, don't believe in God. 18 or so percent said, yes, but not a supernatural being. And then I had 8 pages of other responses who weren't comfortable with any of those pat form answers. And that's fabulous. It was a lot of work for me, but really fabulous. So I'm just going to go back to the other representation of that same thing and say, there's the 38% who said yes. There's the 14% who say no. There's the 37% who say yes, but. So you should make sure to, in an important way, keep this red section and yellow section together, because that's the portion of our community who says yes, whether or not there's a but after it. And then 11% said, I don't know, maybe. And those are also really interesting responses. Okay, so I'm going to keep going, because after we get through the presentation of data, there's other stuff that I want to make sure that we discuss as well. So I was curious about where beliefs came from. and what they looked like. So when you approach this this survey, what do you sort of believe about God? And here's where I had to get really firm in my decisions to drop answers into boxes. So it'd be curious to know whether you see one of these boxes that feels like it describes you, because it might not, and that's my fault. But overall, of the people who said they believe in God, 72 said, I believe in a God who's personal. In other words, God knows me. When I am being me, God knows it. I can talk to God. Maybe I hear back from God, but there's a personal relationship. 58 people described God in non-dual terms. A spirit of the universe, an overarching power. And these are sometimes kind of difficult for an outsider to have to lump in. 46 people described a belief that I called biblical. And what I meant by that was a God who does stuff. And so in the Bible, think about God who's walking around and saying yes, no, a plague, a famine. That's what I meant when I said biblical. So when people described God who does respond to prayer, who makes a change in the world based on prayer, that's what I call biblical. I called an anthropomorphic God someone who had human-like qualities. And in the way that I interpreted answers, 6 people described a God who they felt had human-like qualities. And then here are 60 who said, none of these fit me. I don't believe in God, or this isn't a good question for me to answer. Most of you know how excited I have gotten in the last number of years about non-duality. What's important for me to see here is that way of thinking about God doesn't work for lots of people. Okay. Oops. There we go. So where did these ideas come from? What did your parents or your childhood faith teach you about God? And so what I found was helpful, there we go, was to, again, lump these into some categories. So of the people who answered, 42% said, all I was told was that God exists. That's it. God exists. 41% said, we never talked about this at all. It was not something that came up. We went to whatever. We went for bagels on Sundays and had lox and all the cultural pieces. We did not talk about God. And then a small spread of other responses. Some people grew up being told God knows who you are. That's the personal God we talked about. Some people, 5 of the respondents, came up with a message of non-duality. God is the energy of the universe. And 11 people responded, or 5% said, no, there's no God. That was the message they got from their upbringing. I don't know whether these people are still the ones who say there's no God or not. I didn't line those up, but it's just an interesting notion to see what did we come up with. I meant to ask a question at the outset of the slides, and that was this: to hold in the back of your minds a question, which is, if we had run this survey for a congregation, like ours, a Reformed congregation, 20 years ago, what do we think would have looked different? Where would the distributions have fallen out with a variance? What if we asked these questions of a congregation, progressive congregation, 50 years ago? There were Reformed congregations 100 years ago. We would have had to play with the language. I get it, but how would they have felt about the responses? What messages would they have gotten? Would people have been saying there's no God? Would they have been saying, no, God is the overarching spirit of the universe? What if we asked 1,000 years ago? Congregations 1,000 years ago. How far have we come in our collective relationship to belief? Okay. Come on, clicker. Yeah, Carolyn. Yeah. For folks at home, Carolyn said that there's been a move through the industrial era and then into modernity from a God who's out there to a God who is very personal and in here. And an interesting question that I see being batted around is, now that we've moved through modernity and we're in what might be called postmodernity, where does that take us? What's after that? And this isn't to be answered right now, but if God moved from a God of war out there battling for us to the philosopher's God of the Middle Ages to the personal God of industrial emancipation era, where each of us comes to think of ourselves as inherently valuable, then to the very personal "I'm okay, you're okay," the theology of the post-Holocaust era. Then now in the 2020s, we're in a new stage, and where is it going? This is not at all a surprising slide to me, although kind of funny in little ways. So when I asked the congregation, would you describe yourself as spiritual? Yeah, generally the answer is yes. 76% said, yep, I am. 22% said, nope, I am not spiritual. And then 2% said, I don't know. And I really appreciated that, because for me, it put its finger on the difficulty of language and the hesitancy and reluctance to embrace trends, so that spirituality still is a very heavily laden word, left over probably from the Eastern traditions of the 60s and 70s through the Karlbachi resurrection of neo-Hasidism through the 80s and 90s into today. We're left with a lot of baggage around the word spirituality. And so not everybody is comfortable saying, yeah, I am. But I'm going to give you a couple of actual responses just to show you that I think some of them are really sweet. So I got this a lot. Not really. I'm not really sure what that means. I don't know whether I put this response in that category of I don't know or no, because it starts with not really, but then opens it up to I don't know, maybe. And then someone else said, I don't know. And you can figure out who this is. I don't know. I've been touched in services, but many times in concert by the Grateful Dead. Just think it's the music that moves me, not God. So what's important here, for my purposes, is that this person is being moved. That's spirituality. Spirituality is not connected to God, or at least not necessarily connected to God. Come on. My clicker is, there we go. This person said, as a scientist, I'm rational, not spiritual. And I really respect this as a false dichotomy. I really do think that we have found ourselves in a moment in history where the battle between science and religion is no longer necessary. And yet there's still a lot of baggage left from times when it was. We all know, well, maybe you don't, but Einstein is famous for being a mystic. He was a beautiful, non-dual spiritual being. And if he wasn't a scientist, I don't know what is. When I talk with scientists about what they find amazing and beautiful about the universe, their expressions sound in many ways indistinguishable from my own. We would just use different language. And so when someone like this says, I'm a scientist, all the scientists I know they marvel at the wonder of science. And so I wouldn't be so, I put them into the no category, but I would love the chance to spend a couple of years with that person and see if we might find more common ground than he or she thinks we do right off the bat. And then this last answer is my favorite. I don't think so. But I do like to take a nice deep breath and think about stuff here and there. And if that's your answer, I love it. I love it. Here again, I think is hesitancy. Spiritual? No. But man, do I like being alive. You know, that I think is really special, really beautiful. Oops. So this is a great slide. Where have you found your greatest expression of spirituality? And just, think for a moment, what do you expect you're going to see in half a moment? You're not going to be surprised. Where do you think our community is going to say they find their spirituality? So, and by the way, you can answer more than one. So I didn't force people to pick just a single, although that would have been really interesting. So 80 people or so said sitting and praying. Oh, that I find spirituality there. 151 said nature. That there's no surprise there. 106 said their spiritual moments are with family. 76 said when I'm being creative. I actually thought this might be a little bit higher number. I think that's some of the easiest way to be spiritual is when you're creating. Physical activity. I don't know whether people think of it, but when you're going, you've heard me say this, when you're shushing down a mountain, you're skiing, you're having a spiritual moment, whether you realize it or not, because you're singularly focused on what you're doing. If you're not, you're going to get really hurt. And so physical activity is a great way to push away other burdens that are on your mind that are distracting you from being present. And, those are spiritual moments. Meditation is obvious. Some people said they found spirituality in relationships, really opening to another soul. And then 8 people said that they found spirituality in service to others, which I thought was a lovely message. I'm going to keep going if I can get my clicker. Oh my, there we go. Can you describe any beliefs or practices or teachings that you have found particularly valuable coming from Judaism? So what are the enduring messages that our respondents felt held the test of time? My God, ethical teachings. If I read one more person say, what is hateful to you, do not do to another, I was going to hang up my kippah. But the ethical core of our tradition is clearly central for most of our respondents. And, they're obviously related, but I decided to separate them just for a little diversity. Care for others, that obviously is closely connected to the ethical teachings of our tradition. People found that marking time with ritual, going through cycles of Shabbat and the year, going to Passover Seders, I kind of lumped that stuff in there. It was hard to separate with tradition. But again, I can show you how I coded them if you're interested. There were relationships there. Many people felt like the importance on our community is really an enduring message that they really value that. Tradition meant a lot to people, especially with life cycle rituals. Those were I dumped those. And then a lot of people felt like Judaism is just nicely and importantly focused on personal growth, which is lovely. What a great way to think of your tradition. And certainly reflective of our mission statement. Okay, so I'm going to take down our screen share here, and I'm going to put our folks back over here for us. Here we go. Everyone at home still hearing us okay? Thumbs up? Excellent. So I have lots of questions and lots of what I think are implications and considerations. But before I try jumping into all of that, anybody want to respond thoughtfully or otherwise, emotionally or viscerally to anything that I put up there for us this evening? Yeah, Susan. Great question. Did I correlate the age to responses? And the answer is no. I could have with a lot more help from Wind, but I needed to weigh time invested against it. Because our respondents all skewed more maturely, I didn't feel like there was a lot to be gained because we didn't have enough data points for seeing the trend amongst younger respondents. Yeah, it's a good question. Anybody at home wanna think aloud? Okay. Oh, good. Oh, David, thank you.
Do you think that if the population distribution was more equal,
I know.
Hold on one second. Repeat that last part. If the distribution was more equal, say the last part again.
if the age distribution was more equal and included more people who are less than 50 years old, do you think that the answers to some of the key questions would have been substantially different?
Well, I'm reluctant to weigh in for a couple of reasons that I will explain in a moment, but I'd rather see a show of hands for all of you gathered here in the room and online. Do you think, as David was saying, that if the distribution of age demographic had been representative, that it would have had a meaningful impact on the responses? Who thinks yes? Okay. And who thinks it wouldn't have had an impact? Okay. Probably 2/3 to 1/3. I didn't count, but that was roughly what I saw with hands raised. I tend to think that yes, it would. The reason that I didn't want to answer first was because I am very much aware that leadership is a fine balance of acknowledging what you see or what you believe is the right direction to go and where the population is. You know, the tolerance of rate of change is really important. And I would hate for someone to think that I put my thumb on the scale. There are going to be people who think that anyway, no matter what we do. But I wanted, rather than me saying, David, absolutely, I think that'd be the case. And then saying, and what do you all think? You know, I didn't want to bias the process if it's possible to avoid doing so. Meryl, go ahead. You got to unmute first. There you go.
I'm concerned about Joan.
You're concerned about what?
Joan, she
Oh,
doesn't look good.
yeah. Maybe she's
Can we do something? Can we
taking a little
contact her?
schluff. Someone want to give Stu a call? Yeah, I'll go ahead and for now, just my guess is she's taking a little bit of a schluff, but I'm going to go ahead and yeah, I've unfortunately seen that many times. Where's oh, there we go. Thank you. If somebody wants to give Stu a call and just make sure he goes and pokes Joan to make sure she's good. Thank you, Meryl. I noticed that as well a while ago. I just figured she was getting some Z's. Okay. Steve has his, oh, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. A similar question, which is when I saw the slide on the number of people who grew up Jewish versus became Jewish along the way, it made me wonder whether we were missing some representation of the non-Jewish member of our intermarried couples, because it always seemed like we had many more intermarried couples than that data would indicate. Or do you think I'm making an incorrect assumption about that?
Well, so no, I think if you're just going on demographics, then sure. We had 3% answering the survey who said I'm not Jewish. And that is very clearly oh, see, Joan just said, thanks for turning off my video. So she's good. Clearly we have far more than 3% of our congregation who are not Jewish. I would say that there is some explicable reason for that. Number one, our non-Jewish members married to Jews, I think, tend towards the younger side of our age range, at least, you know, in round big numbers. And so that group didn't respond at all. And then number two, and this is really a generalization because I've got a Allison, sorry, just blanked on your name. I've got Allison sitting back there, who's one of our most engaged non-Jewish members. So this doesn't apply to lots and lots of people, but lots of families I can think of have a non-Jew who's very supportive, but not particularly involved. So I wonder in those families, whether that person would have gotten this email and thought to take the time to respond. I don't know. I mean, numerically, it doesn't look like it, but yeah, that'd be a great data set to gather.
Hi there, Joan Kranz, Jenny's aunt. Is Jenny available? Thank you so much.
Joan, if you can hear me, go ahead and turn off your
I'm
sound.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. We've all been there. Thank you. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, two questions. First of all, what did you find surprising? And number two, usually surveys like this are more telling when we have a trend. So, this is like one point in time. And, so the second question was probably, what do you think this is going to look like in 5 years? What changes do you expect in 5 years?
Yeah, fabulous. You actually asked my question right here. Number 10 on my outline says, ask yourselves, what would responses look like if I asked the same survey of a congregation? I said 20 years in the future. And then I wondered 50 years in the future. What will Temple Sinai respond to this survey in the year 2083? And then, just for fun, what would Temple Sinai respond to this survey in, ready for it, 3023, 1,000 years from now? And for a Jewish people, it's reasonable to ask questions like that because we actually do exist on that timeline. We can look back and wonder what would the trend have shown if we had the survey from 1,000 years ago, as when I started I meant to start with that question. And so you're right, Gary, we don't have a trend yet, but maybe we try it again in 10 years and see where we are. But well, I'll leave that off the table. So the first thing you asked was what surprised me. I was a little surprised at how many of our congregation reported a relationship with a personal God. And I think that's because I don't.
Oh.
And so knowing that is, very traditional and well-founded in our peoplehood in the last, long time. I mean, in a way, Moses had a personal relationship with God, but generally people did not have personal relationships with God until fairly recently. So I think that was a bit of a surprise to me, and important as I think about all of it. Go ahead, Betsy. What kind of what? Hunger. We had a really fabulous conversation on Saturday morning at our Bible study this week about the evolution of traditions and how far we've come, what it looks like today, and that, and it wasn't coming from me. It was coming from the people around the table, physical and virtual, that we should be ready to embrace what's next, because that is the nature of our peoplehood. And it was maybe for me the strongest takeaway from what you led us with in Awakenings, that change is not about getting anywhere. It's about just changing for change's sake. And that's part of how we stay vibrant and alive. The hunger question is harder for me to answer because I asked people some kind of question about, well, what do you think the future should hold? And I got really very little answer on that, which is understandable. Very, very difficult for anyone to say. I guess where I would see the hunger would be in a slide like, where do you find your spirituality? When a huge number show us that they find that connection in nature. Makes me wonder if maybe we're not doing quite enough using nature. That nature is a tool available to us that is undertapped. I'll confess, some of you heard us say that we're going to do a blessing of the pets this summer. I've had people ask for it for 11 years, and answers like that, encouraged me to say, you know what, maybe we should just go ahead and invite people to bring their snakes and horses and chinchillas and do some blessings. So, I guess I would have to project hunger because I can't see hunger explicitly in the material. Did you see hunger someplace? How would you answer that? Yeah, I don't know that I'm ready yet to say one way or the other, but I like what I heard you say. Oh, sorry for people at home. Betsy said that when you open up a set of questions about belief and people have the opportunity, they're going to be expressing what they want. And did I see anything there that they want? And I said, I can't say with confidence, but I do think the fact that 215 people responded and many more opened the survey and thought about it does suggest that there is hunger there. I want to share what I believe, and Temple Sinai is a place where I feel safe doing that. Yeah, Judy. Judy was asking if there was any way for me to glean information from the answers about outside forces that may have pushed people towards Judaism and the synagogue. And I would say no, not in this data, because I think most of the people who responded in the demographic we talked about have been here a long time and probably would be here, most of them anyway. The younger families who might be making choices about whether or not we should affiliate with a synagogue weren't so participatory here. But I would say that a lot of people saying that they want community might be one version of response to, I feel vulnerable out there when I have no community. So I'm going to find a place where I know that I am community. Yeah, Allison. Yeah. Allison was wondering if it has to be that people who expressed a personal relationship with God and those who expressed a non-dual relationship with God are by definition mutually exclusive. Particularly when you think about how many find spirituality in nature. And I think that's fair. It left me uncomfortable all day as I was taking answers and I was dropping them into coarse buckets of response because so many of you offered really nuanced, well thought out answers. In fact, one person, and I can do this for others if you're interested, but one person said, I'd really like a copy of my responses because I spent so much time thinking about it. I'd like to have that, to see what I said and to see what I think in a little while from now. So if you gave me your name and you'd like something like that, I'm happy to share your responses with you. Okay, yeah, Marty Ann.
What was the percentage of responses in the congregation? I know you gave the number of how many, but what percentage is that?
Did everyone hear what Marty Ann said? She wanted to know what's the percentage or the response rate for the synagogue. I can give a pretty good answer to that. Our email list is just under 700. So number one, 215 out of 700 is, well, Henry probably already has that number in his head. Yeah, a third for easy numbers. So a third response. There were a few people who I could tell were answering it side by side. So I could tell that it was two responses within one answer. So I'm going to bump that up and say it was 50%.
Statistically, that's pretty good.
Yes.
Yes, correct. I was kidding about that.
Thank you for tonight and for this conversation and for graphs that you made and what you did. This is
Oh,
amazing.
you're very welcome. Well, let's talk about the next piece of the conversation. If everyone's okay moving forward. Any other comments, questions, or observations before? Yeah, Moira.
By the number of people, I was surprised by the number of people who said that they found spirituality in worship. Did they have comments about the worship that they meant? And did they have any suggestions or anything further on that?
Yeah, Moira was surprised how many people found spirituality in worship, which tells you what she thinks of worship. And she and she wondered whether there was more data that we could glean. What did they say about it they liked? What kind of worship did they mean? And the answer is no. There really wasn't the opportunity to. I mean, again, if Wind and I sat and really aligned answers and separated out all the people who said worship and then looked to see, well, where else do they find spirituality? Maybe we could try to piece together a picture. But I didn't really give them an opportunity to say, yes, worship, but not Saturday morning worship. I much prefer the Sukkot worship. I love there just wasn't that level of detail. Yeah. Betsy said, did I assume that home worship was distinct from synagogue worship? And I think most people would have interpreted it that way. If they said that they really love lighting the Shabbos candles, of course that's worship, but I didn't put it in the worship bucket. I put that under tradition, or depending on how they described it, I put it under the marking time with the Jewish calendar. Okay, great. Randy, go ahead.
What are you sitting here today who are predominantly 50 and older think would have happened to people under 50 that answered these questions?
Yeah.
We're imposing our values on people who are not answering.
Yeah.
And I just think we need to be aware.
Were people at home able to hear Randy? No. So Randy just said eloquently that that it's important to remember the limitations of this material based on the demographic, that there is a really huge and important portion, hunk of our community that isn't represented here. And we're seeing it in the conversation already. It is one of the very first things I have to say next. Clearly, it is missing. Yes. And Maura Erica, who I don't know if she's still with us or not, but was here earlier. We were talking about how, who's going to have the time after a long day of work and then feeding the kids and then getting through the bedtime ritual and getting them into bed and then having a chance to check your personal email. Who's going to take the time then to, what did I say? It was a 5 to 7 minute survey? Suckers. Who's got time to do that? So it wasn't fair for me to dump this survey on our Gen X, millennial, I don't know how many Gen Zers we have, and to expect that they would be available to do something like this. So moving into the next piece of what I wanted to just cover this evening. Oh, sorry, Ronnie, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, so as we travel We try to attend services occasionally and some of the other places just to see. And before I joined Temple Sinai, I did not feel my own spirituality in Temple ever. But since I've joined Temple Sinai, I do feel my spirituality in worship in Temple Sinai, but not in other temples necessarily.
I
Definitely.
really appreciate that. Thank you, Ronnie. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Marty, and it looks like you're in
I
agreement.
agree.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Well, so yeah, go ahead, Henry. Yeah. 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 That's really interesting. Oh, I think, I mean, and I'm being very serious here. I think if you just step back and look at the response material that I've been discussing with you this evening, we are an exceptionally hip congregation. You know, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
he say?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Henry was suggesting that a way to get the data that we're lacking with the younger families is to have it have a survey like this be built in as a part of their onboarding in membership, so that at a point early on in their time with us, as a part of their application process, I think I heard you say that they're asked to participate in a survey like this. And then he said, and maybe we share with them who we are, you know, in the aggregate when it comes to belief, so that they have a chance to say, oh, that's cool. This is a shul that appreciates spirituality and that finds their spirituality all over the place, just like I do. So I really appreciate that. I have to figure out how to operationalize it, but I think it's a great idea. Allison? Yeah, that could be. Uh-huh. Allison is remembering, I think incorrectly, but God bless her. She's a parent in a family with young children, recently members. She remembers that there were questions that are sort of along lines with what Henry was suggesting. I'll go back and check and see. And I'll buy you. Okay, so let me pause the comments and questions for a few more minutes, because I want to make sure we get through a little bit more stuff. By the way, just so everyone can budget their energy, my intent was to continue in a formal way till 8:15, which would be an hour and 15 minutes altogether. So that gives us about another 20 minutes. And then I'm gonna kind of formally end the conversation, but anyone who wants to stay and keep chatting about it is welcome to, till at least 8:20. So clearly we need to get younger participants, and we've talked about ways that we might be trying that. There are several ways that we're contemplating. One is to pare down the survey significantly, and to have iPads available at religious school drop-off, so that when our families with religious school aged kids and our pre-K families are coming in, we can grab them and say, hey, can you take a true 5 minutes and give us a little bit of your feelings here? A second approach is that I mentioned a couple of town hall meetings I had last year with our families enrolled in the pre-K program on Sundays. They were coming once a month. They said this is not nearly enough Now they're coming twice a month. They said, this is not nearly enough. So thank you, Susan. You gave us the money to do it every single week this coming year. So we'll have these little kids and their families in the building every week. So I had two really good conversations with significant sized groups of these parents, and they loved it. I felt kind of heartbroken that they were shocked that the rabbi wants to hear what they have to say. That shouldn't be a shock. That should be, starting number one. So, I think that it's possible for me to do sort of what Henry is suggesting in a group environment, which is to facilitate a series of conversations where I can gather data like this through live conversation. And then the third possibility that we're playing with is an awakenings-like process, which is not different than what I just said, but it's a little bit more frontal, without expecting them to read a book, because who's got time for that? But to try to invite our youngest families to take part in an awakenings-like exploration to help them understand what's even possible. Ben's book was so valuable because it opened up for us perspective on some of the exciting things happening out there in the Jewish world. That really is for me, the significant takeaway. I'd heard about almost all of those things, but I'd never seen them kind of brought together in the way that he did, which was really, really helpful. The awakenings. So now I'm going to start moving towards implications. Okay. This is what I'm sort of doing with this information in my mind. I'm making no changes yet. Don't worry. I am aware that the spiritual needs of our congregation are more varied than would be easy. It would have been easier if we were all in one place and I could just, deliver to that. But it means that we're going to have to be really careful and cognizant as we make moves. If we just kept with the traditional service on Friday nights that we had done for a long time and has over the years morphed as it should. Some of you think too quickly, some of you think too slowly. If we just stayed with that, there'd be a large portion of our respondents who aren't getting their spiritual needs met. If Cantor Micah and I turned towards that and chased that type of spirituality, there'd be a large portion of our congregants who no longer are having their needs met with the liturgy and the traditional worship that they love, that anchors their lives. And so it's just, for me, a very powerful and clear reminder that it's not either or. It's going to be both and it's going to require creative and open-minded experimentation, which is the name of the game these days. They're experiments, all of them. I became very powerfully aware of how important it was in awakenings to put Judaism back in the hands of its users. And I think this is really important. And I hadn't realized that I was doing it intuitively over the years, but I've become more aware of how often I try to put someone back in the leadership spot with the support of their rabbi, rather than let them just walk behind me as I lead them through the process. Again, Betsy helped a lot with this in the way that we talked about awakenings, being very careful not to feed answers to the group, because then we lose out on the collective wisdom and energy. So I'll give you a couple of examples. More and more, it happened again just today. A family reached out about an unveiling. Unveilings are really beautiful and very straightforward, short, accessible services. And so over the years, I've begun playing with getting families to work with me. I create material for them, personalized material, and then helping them with delivering that service without me there. And I promise you, I'm still working. I'm just elsewhere. It's not about diminishing, my work hours. And so often people just feel so good about being able to do their father's unveiling themselves. That's cool. Similarly with eulogies. I don't know how long ago in your mind, actually, I'd be curious, how long ago in your mind did people start delivering eulogies for their loved ones? 30 years ago, was it always the rabbi or the pastor who delivered the eulogies? Both? I didn't grow up with that. In my memory, it was always the rabbi. Maybe it's, regional or cultural, I don't know. It's always the clergy. So Moira remembers that it's always clergy who does eulogies. Yeah. And Beth remembers that it was always mixed. I don't know. Maybe I'm, yeah, go ahead, Liz. Oh, was that a hand?
Yeah, my grandfather passed away in 72. And there were some lovely first cousin eulogies at that point in time. And I don't remember a rabbi being there, but that could be my lack of memory.
Man, that's great. You know, I mean, sometimes rabbis can deliver beautiful eulogies too, but I think it's usually way more powerful, both for the individual and for the people gathered when it comes from, you know, the hearts of someone who's really emotionally invested in it. And then some of you, I'm looking to see who's here. A couple of you may have been there on Friday night. I hope I was playful in my observation aloud, but we had services in here, and then we moved across the building to Kiddush and Motzi. And I got caught here chatting with someone. Cantor, I think, was doing the same thing. And so when I came across the building, I saw, I don't know, 20 people standing around with little thimbles of wine or juice waiting for us. And I tried to lovingly say, all right, Temple Sinai, this was a little bit of a fail. Every one of you knows Kiddush and Motzi. You didn't need to wait for the rabbi to do it. You know, I think that just trying to empower people to take control of their Judaism again, for me, feels like a really good use of my energy. Someone recently, the rabbi said, my job is to put myself out of a job. Was that Rabbi Spratt who said that? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Connie. Yeah, Connie pointed to circles, which is absolutely a piece of the same methodology, putting leadership and ownership back into your hands. You've probably heard me say that when I'm planning a program, tonight notwithstanding, because it's already set up for services, I usually tell Shelley to underset the room. You know, if we think we're going to get 30 people, we set up 20 chairs. Because there's something really powerful in having people come in and say, oh, there's no one to set up chairs. I guess I had better. That's when it becomes your program as much as it is the synagogue's program. Go ahead, Carl. Yeah. 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 What a great idea. Have any of you yet been invited to a program called Wine, Cheese, and the Meaning of Life? Anyone coming to the first one? No, we've got a couple of these on the calendar already, but it's very much like what you're describing. They're small home-based conversations that I'll facilitate, but really just for the sake of getting things going. And they're meant to pull together under-engaged congregants with active congregants, and to let us hear each other and talk about big things at someone's home in an evening. So, you know, if you're interested in being a part of one of those, let Larry know. And each month we're putting together one of them somewhere. And if they grow, then even better. But again, Connie, they're in someone's home. I'm sorry, at home. I don't know if you heard what Carl said. He suggested that we make sure that people get together in conversation so we can hear each other, rather than just self-reporting and then leaving it out in the ethos to percolate. Yeah. Okay. So part of the conversation, I'm going to return to that Saturday morning discussion that we had. Part of it was, how confident are you in what you know? We were reading the story from 1 Kings about Elijah up on the mountaintop battling the power of God against the 450 prophets of Baal. It's a fabulous story. And we were just thinking about the kinds of obvious demonstrations, the supernatural occurrences that the Bible describes, and how those were meant to bring people from where they are to where God wanted them to be in the narrative of the scroll. And how short-lived was their confidence in God. You know, how quickly they forgot that this all-powerful, omnipotent being was just that and went back to their old ways. And so we were talking about how difficult it is to assimilate new information when it's much more comfortable to stay with what has been, even if it doesn't really match your needs. We were laughing about, what could happen that would convince you that the world is flat, or what could happen that would convince you that I don't know, that God is real. If you're a skeptic. And many people said, even if we use the story of the oven of Achnai, where there are demonstrable physical world proofs, miracles over and over again to try to convince the people of one thing. And the people said, nope. We're not going to go there with you, God. Butt out. Reality is what we create. And so one of my fears is that as we play with evolution, Jewish evolution, there might be, if I get the pace wrong, there might be too much fear and people saying, no, that's too much. We don't want it. Let's go back to saying prayers that, I'm not speaking for everybody, but there are lots of people sitting in the sanctuary on Rosh Hashanah saying prayers that they don't believe. And I think that that's important. It's not the end of the story, but I worry that even knowing that Judaism as it was before can't be what it needs to be next, that can scare people. And so it becomes just really a beautiful artistry, I think, as we as a community figure out how to open up to the possibility of what Judaism is going to look like in the next 10, 20, 50,000 years. Looking for comments, okay? So, yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to actually pause there. I got through pretty much all of the substantive stuff that I was hoping to. So I'll open it up to questions in a moment, but or observations or whatever. But I guess I want to say that this is the most exciting moment in my rabbinate. To be embedded as family with Temple Sinai is so exciting that whatever it is, we're going to get to do it together. And we'll like some of it, and some of it will say, it didn't work. What just happened recently that I said, no, that was a fail? Oh, no, it doesn't matter. I know what it is. It was a fail. Yeah, I'll share with you some other time. All right, so let me just, I'll stop with that. Betsy, go ahead. This doesn't microphone anything. Just let them hear.
Okay. I was thinking about what Carl and Henry said about the data collection. And I would want to parse data collected in conversation and data collected over iPads and computers. And I would suggest to you that data that's collected in conversation is actually relationship building in a way that data collection in its purest form is not. And of course, relationship building distorts the data, but might be the most critical aspect of this and not something which is assessed by the numbers yet.
Yeah, that's really well said. And like Sinai circles, and any leader who's gone through the program can tell you that circles are not about the activity, they're about the relationships. That was very much the thinking as well behind these wine, cheese, and meaning of lives, that we're we're looking to get people past that affiliation stage that you and I talked about into the engagement phase, and hoping that they walk away saying, oh, you know what? I'm really glad I came tonight. I don't do a whole lot with the temple, but that was fun. That was interesting. And they'll walk away with some familiar faces and a better feeling of connection to the organism of Sinai. And the data that comes out of it is going to be really valuable, especially if I'm taking notes, but it is secondary in my mind as well to the experience in the relationship building. And that's right. Yeah, David. And I see you, Judy.
The comment that just took place makes perfect sense from a relationship perspective. However, if we're looking to compare the data from the younger subset of the congregation with what we've achieved until now, it's really important that we ask the same questions with the same tools as we did for the 50 plus, the 60% that are 50 plus, because people's answers and behavior in a common setting will be very different than when they're sitting in front of their own computer in the privacy of their own mind and situation. People who are very comfortable speaking in public will say things that other people will not be comfortable. So there are two different goals that we're playing with here.
Yeah.
The relationship versus the data collection aspect.
Yeah, Betsy agrees with your point. That's right. So I guess I have to decide whether I want to try to use these to gather data like Henry was suggesting, or focus instead on just having some really good relationship building kinds of conversations.
Right.
Judy, go ahead. Let's make sure we get you unmuted. Can't hear you yet. Okay, you work on that. See if you can find here. I'll ask you to unmute. You can just click yes. Hold on a second. Where's my button? There, does that help? Can you click on that now?
Good. Quick question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but you didn't ask how important the rabbi is, I don't believe, to people's experience of the synagogue. And my experience over the years is that matters a lot. Was that on purpose or what?
That you got a lot of chuckles in the room here, Judy. What a great question.
I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm sorry if I did.
No, so the quick and simple answer is no. It didn't occur to me to ask a question like that. But the more interesting question is why? Why didn't it occur to me? I have a very healthy ego, and I love hearing how important I am to what goes on in people's Jewish lives. But I think I mean it when I'm trying to move myself to the side a little bit. We're going to be resetting the sanctuary for the entire year in a very different arrangement, not the chapel, but the main sanctuary. And part of that is getting the cantor and me off the bima and, down with the rest of you so that we're just Jews doing it. I don't know if they're still here, but one of the members who's online here with us, I invited to deliver Devar Torah, a couple weeks later this summer. I'm constantly looking for people to take on roles that empower them. Henry just led a Shiva service for us this past week. So it's not that I downplay the role of the rabbi, but I certainly don't want to increase the focus on the rabbi more than we already have it. We've I don't know if it's fair to say we've outsourced our Judaism to the professionals, but to a degree, it's not completely off base.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. By the way, feel free to tell me how much of an impact I have on your Judaism if you feel like. I won't stop you. Anybody else want to think aloud about something they've heard or advice or requests? Yeah, Connie. Yeah, so Connie was wondering aloud with my my suspicion that a lot of people on Rosh Hashanah are not connecting with what's going on in the room. Is there a way to get them to own up to it, to participate in deepening or expanding that experience? I'm putting words in your mouth now, and we're going to experiment with that this year. There's going to be a portion of Yom Kippur where you're not going to see me on the bima because I'll be elsewhere in the building, offering a different kind of experience for people who aren't connecting with what's going on in the sanctuary. So, you know, little experiments here and there. What happens on Yom Kippur in the sanctuary has to keep happening. But maybe there are some other things that also need to happen. And it may be unusual, you know, I'll explain to you where I go when it's time for me to leave the sanctuary, but the rabbi's not in the sanctuary on Yom Kippur? Yeah. That's true. And on Yom Kippur, I get the cookies for myself. You know that joke about the rabbi playing golf on Yom Kippur? Oh my God, the angels are furious. They can't believe that the rabbi has snuck out of shul and he's on the golf course playing Yom Kippur, playing golf on Yom Kippur. And the angels are talking to God about this. And as they're debating this whole thing, the rabbi hits a hole in one. And the angels say to God, I can't believe you just let that happen. What are you rewarding him? And God says, what, are you kidding? That was a punishment. Because who's he going to tell about it? Yeah. All right. Yes.
What was without again?
As you're
don't wanna
talking
put you on the
about
spot, but what was your
Yom Kippur,
favorite takeaway from this? Or
Marty, and I'm so sorry. I was just handing the microphone over to Beth.
I'm sorry. Okay, sorry.
Hold on one second. I'm right back to you.
you said, you know, that people don't relate to what they're hearing, but also, are they relating to what they don't want from their childhood? You know, because we all walk in with stuff. And certainly services today aren't what I remember as a kid in the 50s, 60s, but there's still stuff. So we bring that with us.
Absolutely. Every one of us is an incredibly and beautifully complex narrative. We are Torah scrolls with the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's impossible to refine any one of us down to a simple statement. So I really appreciate that reminder. Yeah. Marty Ann, thank you.
One idea, would you ever consider giving this survey to bar mitzvah students? And bar mitzvah students, and see where they are with it.
Did everyone hear what Marty Ann suggested? She wondered whether this survey is usable for bar and bat mitzvah students. Would it be interesting to have them participate as a kind of like Henry was saying, maybe as a part of the process that this happens along the way? That's interesting. It's very interesting. I have been thinking a lot the last couple of years about how we meet the needs of multiple spiritualities of our students, particularly as they age. So if they're being raised in a family where they're hearing one message at home or no message, and they are being brought to Temple Sinai where they're hearing another message, and for our younger students, pre-bar mitzvah, you know, the messages are pretty fundamentalist in the sense that we teach them that the world was created in 7 days, and that Noah built an ark, and that Moses split a sea, and Abraham, you know, bound up his son. You know, those are really literal teachings. And I, you know, think of it like, well, I don't know, my daughter who raged when she found out there was no tooth fairy. You know, there are a lot of, yeah, I'm sorry, did I just ruin that for you, Judy? There are a lot of people who get rightfully angry that their religious institutions fed them what turns out to be a bunch of lies. And but what is the right moment in a student's journey to begin to open that up? Usually it's right around the time they're dropping out at bar mitzvah. Yeah.
Rabbi, the year before someone becomes a bar or a bat mitzvah, you must be engaging in conversations with them about whether what they think of this process and whether they believe it or they're doing it because of their family. No, we don't do that. No, I can't believe that. I mean, it's the age. That's the age appropriate. And how else do we engage them?
So everyone at home heard what Moira was suggesting here too. Moira was saying, surely in 6th grade, as they're heading towards celebrating becoming B'nai Mitzvah, we must be having these conversations with them, right? And I had to confess, no, we're not. And I think the simplest answer for why is the same answer why most of our students finish their religious education not really knowing a word of Hebrew and actually resenting Hebrew, because they're made to get up there and parrot this language that isn't assigned any meaning for them. Maybe they know a handful of words, but the reason is because we have them for this much time every week. And the curriculum that has been laid out as a basic Jewish knowledge doesn't have a lot of room for anything else. And at this point, we haven't decided that the conversations you're talking about should be a part of basic Jewish knowledge. So in 6th grade, they're learning about the American Jewish experience and Holocaust. And so, we only have them for 90 minutes a week, for 24 sessions in the year, so it becomes a very, very difficult equation. My inclination would be to preface this because, I don't know, I was raised on Holocaust education. It didn't excite me as a kid. Maybe this would have. Yeah, I'm embarrassed to have to admit that what you assume must be happening isn't. Allison?
Hi. How are you?
I think so too. Betsy said that to someone just today. Your kids are way more spiritual than you think they are, and yeah. So Allison, for those at home, Allison is suggesting that there is an opportunity for conversation with parents of young children about these kinds of things. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. Yeah. Allison is sharing with us that she and her husband had very different upbringings. One encouraged questioning and exploration, and here she sits, and her husband was more the formulaic path to be followed, and he doesn't find the same connection she does. And by the way, her little daughter there, Elizabeth, 9-year-old Elizabeth, sitting there, she is my most recent guest on the podcast, which we'll publish in the next couple of days when I can finish editing it. Okay, Wind, and then Everett. Wind was just saying that as one of our mentors, we have a team of mentors. And if anyone wants to be a mentor, oh my God, it's such a great experience. They work with our B'nai Mitzvah students to write their Divrei Torah. Betsy does so. I'm looking to see who else here is a mentor as well. Anyway, yeah, and that's an opportunity for an adult to sit and to really have those meaningful conversations with a kid who's right at that stage. That's great. Yeah, yeah. And Everett.
Thank you, Rabbi. All of us have participated in surveys throughout our careers and our activities. And essentially, there's a body or an individual who puts together the essential purpose of that survey. And essentially, again, per survey is to collect data. And the data should produce either answers or questions, and that the body takes forward. Today, we've sat here and we've learned and had some insight into how all of us think individually, collectively. There's leadership in every organization, and even if the leader isn't included in the survey, it cannot be denied, thank goodness. Should we be equally concerned and interested in how you respond to each of these questions, both in what you anticipated and what you learned by it? And should the results of that survey and its impact on your thinking lead to changes in how we do things, how we assemble information, how we move forward? Or do you use that information to change you to follow us?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. So Everett, I appreciate that. So the one thing I think I can say sort of confidently is I would not ascribe to the notion that what I learned here meant that I'm going to then follow you. I think that wouldn't be leadership. I have been contemplating, I've been writing my sermons for the holidays, and I've got one of them pretty well done. It's called Woke Judaism. It's got a lifetime contract. What do I care? Anyway, I've been thinking about more of a self-revelatory sermon to share a bit more about where I stand on these, but I haven't committed to the idea yet. I think if nothing, more than anything else, what I emerged with from the process thus far of the survey and the other conversations I'm having is just a profound and deep respect for the diversity and depth and power of our congregants' needs. And that, it's tempting to lump them into buckets that I can just classify with code numbers. But every one of those responses is a thinking human being who spent a good amount of time revealing themselves in the survey. And so I feel really overwhelmed by the opportunity to be a part of this process. And we'll sort of watch and see what shape it takes over the years. But yeah, and in terms of changing the way we do things, we always have. I don't think I've kept hardly anything the same from year to year, in the 11 years I've been here. And I don't really plan to do much of the maintenance of what we've always done. So we're constantly evolving, experimenting, trying new things, tweaking, figuring out what's next. I think you can expect to see more of that. So I'll just say a huge thank you. I so enjoyed this conversation just as much as I have enjoyed every other piece of getting to this point. This just is thrilling to me. I can't believe how many of you took part in this conversation tonight. Thank you to those of you at home who made the effort to be here. Thank you to all of you who came out on this beautiful evening and added your voices and energy to the conversation. I really do appreciate you. Thanks all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.